5 world records, 19 minutes, off the bench, and the coaching staff looked at that and still didn't start her the next game. What happened at Team USA's final Women's World Cup qualifying tournament in San Juan, Puerto Rico, is one of the most remarkable stories this sport has produced in years, not because of what Caitlin Clark said, but because of what she didn't. She didn't complain. She didn't post anything cryptic. She didn't whisper to reporters or let anything leak through a source close to the situation. She played basketball. And in doing so, she triggered a chain of events that ended with a head coach disappearing mid-tournament, a replacement coach publicly dismantling her predecessor's approach from the podium, and Caitlin Clark standing at center court holding a Tissot MVP trophy in her first ever senior national team appearance. This is the story of a coaching philosophy that got built in direct opposition to the most dangerous player in women's basketball, and what happened when the evidence finally got too loud to ignore. If this channel has been your source for cutting through the noise on everything happening with Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever, hit that like button right now, because what we're unpacking today goes well beyond one tournament. This story has direct implications for the 2026 WNBA season, the Indiana Fever's ceiling, and the road to the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. Let's get into it. To understand the full weight of what happened in San Juan, you have to go back to July 2025, because that is when the setup for all of this actually began. Clark suffered a right groin strain that pulled her out of WNBA action at the worst possible time, the middle of what was shaping up to be a dominant second season. During the recovery process, a bone bruise on her left ankle surfaced, which compounded the timeline and forced Indiana to make the call that no fan base wants to hear. They shut her down. No more games, no more competitive minutes, no risk to her long-term health. For 8 months, the most talked-about player in women's basketball did not play a single competitive game. During that stretch, the questions were understandable. Would she come back at full explosiveness? Had the time away dulled the instincts and decision-making speed that make her generational? These are legitimate concerns whenever any elite player misses significant time. But here is what those questions looked like by the time Clark walked into Team USA's training camp in early 2026. Embarrassing. She told reporters directly she felt completely healthy. Her conditioning was exactly where it needed to be. No manufactured emotion. No dramatic comeback framing. Just a player who had done the work and was ready to compete. The signals, however, were already there for anyone reading the room carefully. Head coach Kara Lawson had built her reputation as a disciplined, structure-first coach who believed deeply in systems over star power. Her philosophy heading into San Juan was straightforward and in the abstract, defensible. This is a team. Everyone contributes. No single player is bigger than the program. That principle sounds reasonable. It starts to crack the moment you actually examine what Caitlin Clark does on a basketball court, and more specifically, what she stops doing when she's kept off the ball. Clark's greatest value is not simply that she scores, it is that she operates as a living, breathing decision engine that makes every other player on the floor better in real time. Her court vision, her ability to push pace before a defense is even set, her passing angles, her shooting gravity that collapses coverage and creates open lanes for everyone else. None of that functions properly inside a system that deliberately keeps her away from the ball and running through screens in half-court sets. It is like installing the most powerful engine ever built, and then locking the speed at 40 miles an hour because everyone else deserves a fair turn on the road. The tournament had not started yet, and already the collision between Clark's game and Lawson's philosophy was a slow-motion accident that anyone paying attention could see coming. March 11, 2026, Team USA versus Senegal. The opening game of the final Women's World Cup qualifying tournament, San Juan, Puerto Rico. Caitlin Clark's first ever appearance in a United States senior national team uniform, and she was coming off the bench. What happened over the next 19 minutes rewrote FIBA's record books. 17 points, 12 assists, 4 of 5 from three-point range, A double-double in less than 20 minutes of play. Team USA won by 64 points, 110-46, and in those 19 minutes, 5 FIBA world records fell. Not 1, 5. In a single debut performance, coming off the bench. Let that land for a moment, because the context makes it even more staggering. FIBA has been running international women's basketball competitions for decades. The players who set those records were genuine legends of the sport who built their marks over years of elite competition at the highest level. Clark walked in for the first time, played fewer than 20 minutes, and rewrote 5 of them before the game was even fully decided. Most debut performances at the senior international level involve a player still adjusting to the speed of the game, still getting comfortable with new teammates, still trying to find her rhythm in a system she's never run before. Clark played like she'd been doing this her entire career. The efficiency, the shot selection, the vision, the way she was finding cutters before defenders even registered the movement. It was historically unprecedented in the context of international women's basketball. The reaction from the basketball world was immediate, practically universal, and not remotely subtle. This is your engine. Give her the keys and watch what happens. The coaching staff looked at all of that evidence and decided to keep her off the starting lineup anyway. The official reasoning that Lawson communicated publicly was that the roster was deep and versatile, and that everyone needed to find their contribution within the team structure. In a vacuum, that might sound like responsible roster management. The problem is that finding roles is what you do in training camp. When a player walks into Game 1 of an international tournament and shatters 5 world records coming off the bench, the role conversation is over. The role found her. The coaching staff simply refused to acknowledge what the evidence was screaming at them in real time. And the cost of that refusal was about to become impossible for anyone to ignore. Between the Senegal opener and the game against Puerto Rico, something happened to Team USA's starting lineup. It changed significantly. Then it changed again. The only holdover from the original starting 5 across those adjustments was Chelsea Gray. Every other spot had been reshuffled. That is not a tactical adjustment. That is a reconstruction, the kind you make when you are trying to find combinations that work, except you are deliberately leaving out the player who already demonstrated she makes every combination better. Clark was still not starting, and the offense showed it immediately. The ball in the Puerto Rico game moved through half-court sets instead of flying in transition. Players who thrive in open space were standing flat-footed, waiting for plays to develop rather than running ahead of defenses. The spacing looked off. The pace was gone. It looked like a different team from the one that had steamrolled Senegal, not because the roster had changed, but because the engine was being kept at idle. Clark addressed it after the game with the careful diplomatic precision of a professional navigating an uncomfortable situation. She said the pace had slowed, that zone defenses were disrupting the team's rhythm, and that they needed to play faster. She said it without pointing at anyone, without naming names, without leaving anything on the record that could be used against her. But if you understand basketball well enough to follow what she was actually describing, the translation was not subtle at all. When she is not running the offense does not run right. The data was backing her up in real time, in front of every fan watching from home. Before we get into how this whole thing finally broke open, drop a comment right now and tell us what you were thinking as you watched that Senegal game. Because the fans who have been following Clark closely had already seen this before. That tension between what she's capable of and the systems that keep pulling her back. Sound familiar? Let us know below, because your read on this matters. And we are going to get into exactly why in just a moment. What made the situation in San Juan more striking than a simple rotation disagreement was what happened at the podium. When reporters finally got a direct question about Clark's role in front of Kara Lawson during a press availability, what came back was one of the most precisely constructed non-answers you will hear from a coach in a high-pressure setting. Lawson did not say Clark wasn't ready. She did not point to a specific tactical concern tied to any particular matchup. What she offered instead was a speech about how every player on this roster was a starter on their WNBA team, how everyone had made sacrifices for the good of the group, how the team's willingness to share the ball was a sign of their collective character. All of that might be true. None of it answered the question that was actually asked. The reporter asked about Caitlin Clark specifically. Lawson responded as if the name had not been said, and in the space between the question asked and the answer given, everything that fans had been sensing for days was effectively confirmed. This was not about matchups. It was not about conditioning. It was not about Clark needing time to adjust to the international game. She had already adjusted in 19 minutes against Senegal. This was a coaching philosophy prioritizing something other than the team's best chance to win. There is one name that hovered in the background of the entire San Juan situation without getting nearly the attention it deserved. That name is Stephanie White. White is the head coach of the Indiana Fever, which means she coaches Caitlin Clark every single day throughout the WNBA season. She was also on the USA basketball coaching staff in San Juan in that same building, contributing to those same rotation decisions alongside Lawson. The public relationship between Clark and White has been described by both parties as positive, and White is a coach with genuine credentials and real respect within the league. But here is what is also observable, if you have been watching Indiana's games with any regularity. White's system does not always let Clark operate at full speed. There have been stretches throughout Fever seasons where Clark has been used more as an off-ball player, running through screens, catching and shooting in structured sets, rather than as a true pace-pushing point guard with the freedom to make primary decisions in transition. That approach has worked in certain situations, but it does not produce the same result as what you see when Clark is actually given the wheel. In San Juan, you had Lawson running a rotation philosophy that consistently limited Clark's control of the offense, and sitting right beside her on that bench, Stephanie White, whose own system in Indianapolis follows a strikingly similar operational logic. Two coaches, same staff, same tournament, same philosophy, same result. When fans online started calling it the anti-Clark system, they weren't just being dramatic on social media. They were reading what was actually in front of them. And the uncomfortable question that raises, the one that matters for the 2026 WNBA season, is whether that same philosophy has been quietly leaving points, assists, and wins on the table in Indianapolis over the past 2 seasons. How many transition opportunities went unpursued? How many games got harder than they needed to be? Those questions are now impossible to dismiss, and they are going to hang over everything Stephanie White does with Clark in a Fever uniform this season. If this level of analysis is why you keep coming back, the angles that nobody else is connecting, consider joining this channel as a member. Your support is exactly what makes it possible to keep going this deep. Hit that join button below. But before any of those questions about Indianapolis could play out, the story in San Juan took a turn that nobody had anticipated because the coaching controversy stopped being theoretical the moment the head coach disappeared entirely. Heading into Team USA's game against New Zealand, Kara Lawson was not on the sideline. No press release, no injury report, no explanation from USA Basketball, no official statement of any kind. One day she was standing at a podium carefully steering around questions about Clark's role. The next day she was simply gone. The only confirmed information was that Nate Tibbetts, head coach of the Phoenix Mercury, would step in as interim for the rest of the tournament. In any other sport, a head coach going absent mid-tournament without any public explanation would generate a weeks-long media storm. Here, the silence from official channels was almost eerie. Reporters asked, organizations deflected. The full story around Lawson's exit never became transparent, and in that transparency vacuum, every plausible theory started circulating. Internal friction with USA Basketball leadership, disagreements over rotation strategy, pressure from above about how the team's best player was being deployed. None of it confirmed, all of it plausible. What made the silence harder to sit with was the timing. Lawson stepped away at the exact moment the criticism had reached its loudest point. The press conference dodge had already made rounds everywhere. Fan frustration had been building for days. And right as that pressure peaked, she was gone. To be clear, the full reason behind Lawson's departure has not been officially confirmed. She is a respected coach with a serious career, and reducing her to the villain of this story would be unfair. But the absence, and especially the complete lack of transparency around it, amplified everything that had already been playing out on the court. When something significant happens and nobody explains it, people fill in the blanks. And the blanks here were shaped in a very specific way. Share this video with someone who has been following this story, because what came next is the part that settled the entire argument. And we want as many people watching it happen in real time as possible. What happened next was not ambiguous. Nate Tibbetts had the wheel, and the very first thing he did with it made his read on the situation unmistakably clear. He put Caitlin Clark in the starting lineup. The five Tibbetts sent out against New Zealand said more than any press conference statement ever could. Kelsey Plum, Caitlin Clark, Paige Buchers, Ryan Howard, Angel Reese. No rotation experiment, no everyone gets a turn philosophy, no committee approach. He looked at the roster, identified the best combination of players, and put them on the floor from the opening tip. Team USA won 101-46. A 55-point demolition, the largest margin of victory across the entire qualifying tournament. But the score alone doesn't capture what actually happened in that game. The ball moved freely from the opening possession. The pace returned immediately. Transition opportunities opened in waves. Clark pushed the tempo from the first possession she touched, found cutters before defenses could recover, and ran the offense the way she runs it when she is actually allowed to run it. Assists went up, spacing opened. Players who had been standing flat-footed in half-court sets for days suddenly had angles and lanes they hadn't seen all tournament. It looked like a completely different roster. Same players, completely different output, because the one thing that changed was who was running the show. Clark's efficiency in that game was the best she posted all tournament. Her assist total led the team. The 55-point margin wasn't just a win. It was a basketball argument so clear it barely needed words. And then Tibbetts went to the podium, and the story went to a completely different level. Coaches have a code. They protect each other. When asked about a previous staff's decisions, the standard response involves phrases like, "We're always evaluating our approach," or "I have a lot of respect for the work done before me." That is how the protocol works at this level of competition. Tibbetts skipped all of it. He said in plain language that the group had needed more time to play together, that too many lineup changes had disrupted team chemistry, that the results they had just produced were what happens when you let the talent find its rhythm. He effectively ate crow, live, on camera, on behalf of an approach that wasn't even his. He answered directly every question that Lawson had been dodging since day one of the tournament. That does not happen. And the fact that it happened told you everything about how obvious the problem had been to anyone watching with clear eyes. By the time the tournament in San Juan wrapped up, Team USA had gone 5-0, perfect record, qualified for the 2026 Women's World Cup. And when the Tissot MVP award was announced, the conversation was brief. Caitlin Clark, first ever senior national team appearance, 5 FIBA world records broken in her debut, tournament leader in assists, best efficiency numbers across the 5-game qualifying run, MVP. All of that in a tournament where for the first 3 games, she was not even starting. Now think about what those numbers look like if the starting lineup decision gets made on day 1 instead of game 4. The record-breaking performance against Senegal already lives in the official books permanently. 5 FIBA records shattered by a player in her debut coming off the bench. That sentence is attached to this tournament forever. And the footnote to it will always read that the coaching staff watched it happen and still didn't start her the next game. That is the kind of detail that ages poorly for everyone involved. 2 separate timelines are now running at the same time, and both of them have Caitlin Clark at the center. The first is USA Basketball. Kara Lawson's future with the program has not been officially resolved. Whether she returns to the head coaching role or whether the organization looks at Tibbetts' 5-0 qualifying run and decides that is the model to build toward the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics, that decision has not been made publicly. But the pressure to get it right has never been higher. The 2028 games will be played on American soil, in front of an audience that has made Caitlin Clark the most recognized face in women's sports. Sending that team into an Olympic tournament without Clark at the center of the offense after what the entire world just watched in San Juan would be a decision requiring an explanation that does not exist. The second timeline is Indianapolis. The 2026 WNBA season is approaching fast. The roster around Clark has continued to develop in ways that make the ceiling genuinely alarming if the right system ever catches up to the talent already on the floor. Alia Boston anchoring the paint creates a gravitational presence that frees up perimeter players in ways that compound everything Clark generates. Sophie Cunningham brings sharp shooting and relentless intensity off the wing. And she is the specific kind of player who becomes a nightmare for opposing defenses when someone like Clark is pushing pace and collapsing coverage before sets can form. Cunningham doesn't need the ball in her hands to impact a game at a high level. She moves intelligently without it, spaces the floor naturally, and plays with a physical edge that raises the energy of everyone around her. In an offense where Clark is running transition and finding shooters before the defense is even set, Cunningham in catch-and-shoot situations is nearly impossible to account for. That weapon only activates in a system where Clark is the engine. San Juan showed the whole basketball world, one more time, and at the highest credible level. Like IQ always, exactly what that engine looks like when it is actually turned on. Here is what Tibbetts proved during those final games in Puerto Rico, and what the Tissot MVP award then stamped into the permanent record. Clark won that award despite the system, not because of one built around her. That distinction matters more than anything else in this story, because it means the ceiling has not even been touched yet. What those numbers look like when an offense is actually designed to maximize her strengths, not contain them, is a question the 2026 Indiana Fever season is going to start answering in a way that will be very hard to look away from. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because this season is going to produce the kind of moments that people talk about for years. Clark is healthy. The records are in the books. The people who spent 3 games trying to contain her just watched her win a tournament MVP anyway. The argument that she needs to be managed, slowed down, kept off the ball for the health of the program, that argument does not survive contact with this evidence. It got tested in Puerto Rico, it got contradicted in every stagnant half-court possession, and the MVP trophy put the final stamp on it. If you think Kara Lawson comes back to the head coaching role for Team USA heading into the 2028 Olympics, or if you think Stephanie White's approach changes in Indianapolis after what the world just watched, drop your prediction in the comments right now. We are covering every development as this story continues to unfold, and the next video is going to go somewhere this one only pointed toward.